This is the Albion Online Fire Staff tier list. Today, I'm going to be showing off all of the Fire Staffs and where they rank on the tier list. Let's get right into it. First up is the Fire Staff with the spell Pyroblast that lets you channel a large exploding fireball, and you can aim it while you channel. You can even end the channeling early to deal a little bit less damage if you need to fire it off. So where does it stand in the tier list, okay? So, I'm going to go over several different PvE aspects like open world farming, dungeon farming, all that fun stuff. Let's get it on the screen here. For solo PvE, alright, it kinda works, okay? And let me explain why. In open world mob farming, it's kind of okay. It's decent enough to use. You're not gonna really fame farm super fast with it. For dungeons, it's not really that good either. It works, but it's not really that great. You can blow up certain packs of mobs in one shot, though you do have to stand there and channel, so it's kind of slow. All in all, it just kind of works, okay? What about group PvE? That includes like group dungeons, solo and group dungeons, static dungeons. You don't bring anything to the table. If someone's in my, like if I was, one of those elitist jerks and I was hosting a group PvE party, I'm not going to let a fire staff in my group. There's just no reason to bring one. You don't really do anything that any other weapon in the game does better. Solo PvP, it kind of works. If your opponent stays in fights, you don't really have chase. You have decent damage. You have decent burst. But I wouldn't really say it's worth using. It's also not really the worst PvP weapon for solos. Open world, it's really not great. You don't really have a lot going on for corrupteds. Again, it's okay, it's not that great. You deal lots of damage, especially if you land your hits, but it's nothing special or nothing crazy. For group PvP, again, why are you bringing this weapon to a group PvP fight? You don't really do anything other than blow up a small area. There are way better fire staffs that do everything that this does better. Now, this last category, this question mark category here, this is including any little special things like maybe gathering, maybe soloing like faction stuff or anything of the merit, but there's really nothing unique that the fire staff does for any kind of unique situations. For arena, it kind of works. It's okay for arena. It's not the worst for arena, but for everything else, like for gathering, skinning, it works. It's not really the best, but it is kind of fun to blow up like 10 animals at once and then skin them, which they should be burnt crispy. I don't know how you skin that, but again, it's just an okay weapon to use. It's not necessarily top of the line. Next up is the Great Fire Staff. At tier 8, it is known as Vendettas Wrath. That means it just has special naming, but it puts a little AoE on the ground and then blows up. If you hit an opponent, it does lower the cooldown, meaning this is quite spammable, so it is useful in certain situations. To the tier list, where does it exist on the tier list? Okay, so Great Fire Staff for solo PvE, for open world mob farming, it's pretty damn good. It's worth using because of the low cooldown. It does high damage. Now, as far as being the best, it can technically be one of the best for fire staffs, but overall in every weapon, it's worth using if you like fire staffs, if you want to open world mob farm. For dungeons, it's totally worth using compared to other fire staffs. I wouldn't, hate you for it. It's not the best boss killer, but it is very, very good at clearing trash mobs. For group PvE, yeah, go ahead and bring one. You're fine. You're dealing lots of AoE damage very quickly on a low cooldown. It is not the best for group PvE for fire staffs, but it is pretty damn good. There's no real downside to this as far as group PvE goes. About soloing group PvE, you can do it. It's going to be a little tough. Solo PvP, it's so easy to dodge. It's hard to set up. You don't really have a way to like hit opponents with it unless they're really brain dead or new to the game. It's awful. Don't use this for PvP at all. Group PvP, it kind of works. It's not the best. It's really not worth bringing to a group PvP event, honestly, but it is decent because you can just throw it around and you deal some damage, so you're not completely useless. Other uses for this would be skinning. It's worth using for skinning, for sure, absolutely. If you want to use this to skin mobs, it's not a bad weapon. If it's one of your mains, that's fine. It's other things like arenas. It's really good at zone controlling in arenas, too. There's no super downside to it. Yeah, there might be something better that you can choose, but it's still worth using for things like arena. Other than that, there's no other real secret crazy stuff that you can do with this. The Infernal Staff will cast a debuff on your target, and then as they run away, it will create a fire trail, and everything in the fire trail will continuously burn. It actually deals a surprisingly high amount of damage if your target is either standing still, or if he runs through a crowd of other players. But it's very niche, okay? I want to love this weapon. It's been nerfed over the years. It used to be way more potent. It used to like launch AoE explosions around itself, and it was actually pretty deadly then. So how does it measure up on the tier list? Okay, for solo PvE, it sucks. It's really garbage. Either your target is going to die before it really runs around a trail. It's super hard to micromanage because you need your target, you need to cast it on a melee, and they need to be running through other mobs for it even to work. It's awful, it sucks for world PvE, it sucks for dungeons, everything, okay? Group PvE, again, there's no point. Unless there's some sort of new meta where the tank runs mobs in circles, which I know that's hardcore expeditions, but you're not going to bring this to a hardcore expedition. The damage simply isn't there. Solo PvP, no, this is meant for group PvP only. You cast this on a target, he like as long as he's not standing still, then he's barely taking damage. It's garbage in solo PvP. For group PvP, well, it kind of works. Okay, it can also be the best, but I'm gonna explain. You have to be in a really large blob, and you have to cast this on a target that's going to be running through lots of players, which can happen. What happens is, if you cast this on a low HP target, he will start running to the back line to get heals, in which case, hey, it's worth using. If you cast this on a target that's stunned in the middle of a giant explodey AoE, tank push, it kind of works because you're dealing lots of damage to everyone within the vicinity of the rooted player, but he's not really running around spreading the fire. Other than that, it doesn't really have much of a use. For skinning purposes, there's better weapons. For arenas, there's not enough targets to make it worthwhile. It's one of the crappier fire staffs, but it is a lot of it's a lot of fun. Whoops, grabbed the wrong image there. It is a fun. It's really fun. It's just fun to catch people on fire and watch them run away. So for fun factor, it's probably one of the most fun fire staffs, but it sucks otherwise. Just don't bother. The Wildfire Staff shoots a magma boulder that deals damage to targets and then also deals maximum HP to targets as true damage over 4 seconds. This is only for players and not mobs. Sadly, it's a very niche weapon, but where does it measure up on the tier list? Alright, so for solo PvE, it pretty much sucks. The damage is crappy. Yes, it comes out quickly. It's almost it's a fast cast ability, but it doesn't have any special PvE interactions. The cooldown isn't really the best compared to other fire staffs. It sucks. It's awful. Now for group PvE, same thing. You're not bringing a damn thing to the table. Don't bring this to group PvE at all. Solo PvP, you can kind of make it work, but it's really, there's just better. Just don't use this for solo PvP at all. It's really not that good. For group PvP, it kind of works. You're not bringing much to the table. You might be able to cast this on some tanks to give them very light pressure. I've never really seen Zerg versus Zergs have, a tank-busting, squad that swoops in. It's a fun idea that I've had, but I've never seen it in action. And I think those Zerg guys, those, big guilds, they might know a little bit more about group PvP than I do, since I don't really do that kind of stuff. But from what I've seen, you almost never see this weapon in group PvP anyway. Sure, it works. You're going to deal a lot of damage in a line to a bunch of people clumped up together. You're going to deal more damage to tanks or people with high HP, but you're not really going to kill people with it. You're not going to deal as much damage as other fire staffs, so I don't see the point. Again, for skinning arenas, there's no point. It's pretty much down there. It's just one of those weapons that you gotta level up if you want to main the entirety of fire staffs. Just avoid this one. And now everyone's favorite fire staff, the Brimstone staff, is the staff that lets you summon a big AoE meteor that stuns and deals huge amounts of damage to everything caught in the circle. But how does it measure up in PvE with a 30-second cooldown and high damage? Let's find out. Alright, so the Brimstone staff in solo PvE You know, it's actually decent. You can AoE down an entire group of enemies in one hit. You can one-shot them, only for the channeling cost. Okay, it's not really the best, but it's decent. It's worth using. You can clear dungeons. You can do solo open world mob farming because you get the opener. You get the first attack before they aggro, and because of that, you can deal most, if not all, of their health in a single cast. Which the channeling time is the only downside, which would make me kind of want to put it down here, but it's still worth using. Go ahead and use it for your PvE if you want. For groups, there's better, okay? But it's still decent. If you brought this to a group dungeon to DPS with, it's okay. You know, you're not going to piss anyone off except for the really turbo elitist guys out there. But hey, if you want to level this up through group dungeons, go for it. You deal decent damage, and you actually kind of stun the enemies, so you have a little bit of utility too. Solo PvP, you're not going to land this. You could put a single guy to sleep with like a Brimmy cap, which is the Harvester cap. But you're not really going to land this on a solo player. Unless they're really like lagging or something, or they're asleep at the wheel. I don't know. It sucks for PvP, just solo PvP. Group PvP, oh boy. Yeah, you guessed it. Oh man, this thing deals an insane amount of damage. This is the killer. This is like, you know when tanks all dive bomb a point and hold everyone down? This is what you kill them with. This is the killer of, like, this turns the tide of a war. If there's like 20 dudes caught in a circle being held down, you drop a meteor on them, they're done. The fight's over. They are KO'd, and even if they survive, you know, the aftermath, they're still stunned from it. They've literally been blown up by a space rock, okay? Absolutely great for group PvP, probably the best in the Fire Staff lineup, if not one of the best out of all weapons for group PvP, for those of you that follow tanks around and just drop meteors on, you know, tank dives. What about skinning, arena, stuff like that? It kind of works. Like, you can use this to make people leave the point on arenas. For skinning, it's okay. Not a whole lot of other utility outside of the main four here. But it's still, all around, it's a good weapon to use. The Blazing Staff is the one that summons the Big Fire Tornado. This spell, big AoE, huge amounts of damage for both enemies that are stuck in the fire tornado, but also for players. It actually deals a bonus damage to players, and if they leave the tornado, they will continue to burn for a large amount of damage for 1 second after they leave the fire tornado. So it still hurts, even if you just tap them with it. Alright, to the tier list. Here it is. Okay, for solo PvE, out of all the Fire Staff weapons, this is by bar none one of the best, because it has an insanely high single target damage for mobs, because mobs are going to stand in your tornado. Mobs are stupid. They don't know that they're standing in a fire tornado. They're not programmed to react to it. So what this means is you can cast this on a boss monster, and you will deal a huge high amount of DPS while you cast your other spells. You're not stuck channeling this. It's a cast and forget spell, which I don't know why that ever got... I don't know why that's the way it is, but it is. So it's absolutely one of the best for pretty much open world mobs, dungeons, and so on and so forth for the Fire Staff tree. Comparing it to all other weapons, like, it doesn't really hold a candle to crossbows, to the Nature Staff, to spears, but it's still worth using. Still absolutely worth using. The only downside is the high cooldown, but by the time you kill one boss with this, you're going to just be running through the mobs, and by the time you reach the next boss, you're going to have it off cooldown once again. Group PvE, again, same thing. You bring this to a dungeon, if they're using those damage meter add-ons, which you're not supposed to use those, you're going to be topping the charts with this bad boy, so absolutely bring it to your group PvE events. For soloing mobs, yes, this can solo group dungeon mobs. It's not the best. That's the Shadow Caller, by the way. But it's still worth using, still absolutely destroys group PvE content. Now, solo PvP, well, you can actually hit a player. If you hit a player with this once, it's still okay. It's decent. You're still doing damage, but there's better other Fire Staffs for PvP. Group PvP. Now, this is now the Brimstone Staff, way better because it's instant, immediate, just front-loading damage, which prevents people from running away from healing, from recovering. But even if you bring this to a group PvP event, you're still going to deal tons of damage, especially if targets are held down in your tornado. They're going to take so much damage. This actually will out-damage a Brimstone staff if they stand in the entire duration of the tornado, but it's not a fight ender, simply because people can run away and get healed or chug potions or deploy countermeasures, like shields and other such things. They're not just one-hit dead, they are burning over time. Now, for skinning, it's actually worth using for skinning. You get all the mobs on top of you, cast the tornado, and they're gonna burn to death. As simple as it is a long cooldown, but by the time you run to your next pack and aggro all the mobs, it's still pretty good. Now, for again arenas, it's worth using because you can zone control people out of control points. So it's not a lot of downsides. Yeah, all around awesome weapon. Finally, we've reached the Dawnsong, which is the Avalonian weapon, and the way the targeting works is a little interesting. You have your targeting reticule, and then you can point to where it flies, so it looks like this. Alright, and it leaves an AoE fire trail. It deals an okay amount of damage, but this is more of a utility weapon, meant to debuff people from receiving healing, not so much front-loading lots of damage. So with that said, how does it measure up on the tier list? Well, it's simple, okay? For PvE, it kind of works, though the damage really is kind of lacking, and it's got the high cooldown. I would put it here pretty much towards the bottom for solo PvE. Dungeons, again, I'm not really feeling this one. Like, the only real healers in dungeons are certain bosses in the, I don't know, just whatever. It sucks. Don't worry about it. I forget the names right now. Okay, group PvE, again, don't bother bringing this. You don't need to debuff healing in PvE at all. There's way better damage dealing fire staffs out there. Again, just don't waste your breath. Solo PvP, you're not even the best heal debuffer. That would be axes. But even then, if you try to like say a corrupted dungeon, you're fighting a holy staff user, you're still gonna lose. Even if you land this and they stand in your fire, you're still gonna lose because it sucks that much. You need to stack more healing debuffs than just this one spell to be effective in PvP. Group PvP, it kind of works. It's not really the worst, but I wouldn't say it's even worth using. It's very niche. Yeah, you can blanket an area and the healing will kind of suffer for a small amount of time. It's usually the Axe's job to get in there and debuff healing and bleed people, to debuff healing even further. That's the Halberd's job, whereas you would just supplement that. And again, I haven't really seen this in Zerg versus Zerg, faction versus faction. I don't know, this weapon needs a buff or a makeover or something, because it sucks. Skinning, it kind of works, it's not the best, there's better. There's not a lot going on with this in arenas. It's not great for zone control, it's not great for damage, it's just all in all, just garbage. I don't know what to say, guys. But anyway, that is the tier list for fire staffs. I'm Soul Binging, thanks for watching. As always, be a bro, stay swole. I read every single comment. Let me know what you thought, if you agree, you disagree. If there's some hidden specialties that these weapons have that I didn't mention, then we can mention in a future video. Videos every day. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's video. If you're well off in real life, have lots of money, help me out. Get me a new pair of headphones. Click the thanks button down below to leave a monetary donation. Here's one now. Let me see if I have that activated here. Not sure if it'll work, but here we go. This was from a couple days ago, and it didn't work. Okay, well, let's try. There it goes. It took me a sec there. D34 Ash donated the 30 bucks. Thank you so much for that. Now, to donate like that, you have to do it through the Streamlabs link, not through the thanks button. Anyway, you can also further support me by becoming a channel member. It is $5 a month. You get access to private, more personal videos. There is a playlist in the pinned comment if any of those videos interest you. One of those, how to be a YouTuber. I've got a corrupt dungeon build that I thought was too good to show to the public. Just stuff like that. Go ahead and check that out if you want. It's like being subbed on Twitch, but it's on YouTube. I know. With that said, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, watching me. What do you think about this tier list? Let me know if I should do more. Let me know what weapon I should do next, or armor, or whatever. And anyway, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you're subbed so you don't miss it. Take care. Mwah.